coming up on this episode of It's That Part.
Now, with everything going on in the world, the immigration, you mentioned Gaza, student debt, you mentioned that, race relations, what issue is personal to you right now?
Definitely immigration, especially now with the ICE raids that are happening as we speak right now, as we speak in downtown LA. And like in the podcast episode that I did for Brown, where my segment was talking about immigration in Rhode Island, because there is like a section in Rhode Island that is predominantly Latino. ICE is targeting those places and like going to establishments and
yeah, it's that part. The part that makes sense. The one that hits different with your host, Jesse Lee Hammonds. Let's get into it.
What's the truth? Total truth in every fact. What's that spark? Oh, that part that brings you back. What's that light? Oh, that part that makes it clear. It's that part.
Welcome back. It's That Part, where we cut through the noise and get to the truth in every fact. I'm your host, Jesse Lee Hammonds. Today, we're going to have a conversation with literally America's future. It's Becky Montez of Los Angeles, California. She's currently a student at the Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, where she studies political science and visual arts, which includes photography and painting. Also at Brown, she's a member of La Alianza, a Latino pre-law society which provides resources for Latino pre-law and pre-policy students, specifically on campus. Becky is also a co-host of the Brown Political Review podcast, and she joins me now. Becky, welcome to the podcast. It's That Part, and there is meaning behind that. It's that part right there. Now, for those of you, which include myself, that haven't met you, how would you describe yourself outside of the resume? Because I know, because a person can, say, I've done this, I'm that, this, that, and the other. You can read it right down there. But what's that Becky outside of the resume?
That's a good question, because I always struggle with this because I always have like my school and education as part of my identity, it is true. But also outside of that, I feel like I'm a very creative person, and whether that be like traditional in like art, but I also can manifest in like, I really like baking and cooking. And then I love to read books, and like, I'm really into pop culture, and it's kind of bad. I'm very chronically online.
Let's put it like this, or twist it a little bit. How does the personality that you just described show up in the work that you do, whether it's at Brown or back here in the LA area, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I feel like I'm a very empathetic person, and I feel like that kind of manifests itself with my art and what I study at Brown at political science. And it kind of like manifests itself with like the intersection of both of them. Like with political science, one of the reasons why I got into it was because I saw like firsthand with my parents their struggle as being like immigrants here and then obtaining their citizenship. And I saw all the hardship that they were going through. And so I decided that I wanted to kind of be, later in my career, help people like my parents. And also I had like interest in politics, but most importantly, I had interest in I was very into the Constitution, and like I was very nerdy, and I would have a pocket Constitution, and I would just love looking at.
I love that.
Looking at all the Bill of Rights. Yeah. And then I feel like the intersection with art too. Initially I thought they were two different things, and I was like, there's no way that they can like coincide, until the summer of my junior year, where I had an internship at the UCLA Hammer Museum. And it was a combination of a workshop, but also we collaborated with a nonprofit organization called Arts for LA. and they wanted to do a campaign on help K through 12 education have arts education. And within that, we were instructed to make like posters and create artwork for the proposition. And so that was kind of like our deliverable at the end of the internship. And then after that, I decided that I was very passionate about that. So I continued to pursue that with Youth for Prop, the number it was. And we kind of made like a social media about it. And at the end, we kind of did like a panel and a presentation to like future and prospective voters for the proposition. And in the end, the proposition passed. So I feel like we were able to, see our effort and see how it like flourished.
Right. You had mentioned both of your majors there, and I'm glad you went down that direction. As a political scientist, if you would, or as it relates to political science and the visual arts, what does that combination of intellect and creativity allow you to explore that many others might miss?
Having a political outlook on art is helpful in that, like, when you're creating art, I feel like you think more ethically, and you kind of like, for example, if you're doing photography, you would kind of want to be like, okay, so the ethical side and the moral side of what pictures not to take and what pictures are appropriate to take. Or you could also use that in mind of if there's protests and you want to take a photo of any protests that are happening, also take in mind that you don't necessarily want these people's faces in the photos because you know that they can be identifiable. And then so it's kind of more conscious of how you are just the people who are looking at your art and kind of how it impacts those people in it. And then I guess for the artist's creative mindset in politics, I feel like it kind of goes through like empathy and also seeing the beauty in any political issue or topic. I feel like having a creative perspective on any political issue, I feel like it kind of gives me a more expansive view and just kind of taking more viewpoints of other people. Because I feel like art making, you're getting a lot of criticism and like different takes from different people. And I feel like that can manifest itself in politics. You can hear different sides. And then I feel like I am more geared to taking all those, viewpoints and kind of like thinking about it to myself and then like picking up what I think goes together and what makes sense for me and then forming my own opinion on something.
Well, as far as those two, do you ever find yourself choosing one or the other, or are they in constant dialogue with one another?
I feel like in college, I would say that I decided on visual arts because I took one class and then I realized how much I needed one art class in my semester, or else I would very much go in depressive mode and very like academic, like focused.
It was therapeutic.
Yeah, it was a therapeutic thing. And I was like, I would say to my friends, that would keep me sane. So I always had the art. And so I was like, okay, might as well. If I'm going to take an art class every semester, I think about majoring in it, and also would probably want to pursue also something in the creative field. So I feel like sometimes, yes, they're in common or fighting against each other, but I feel like realistically, the end point, I'm thinking like, law school, which is more directly for the political science side. But I think while I'm actually in college, I feel like a lot of my side gigs and hobbies go towards the creative side.
You mentioned law school. The previous guest I was alluding to earlier, I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but one of them being a former Superior Court judge had indicated that back in the day, if you were thinking about going to law school, actually political science was considered pre-law at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually pre-law, you didn't do that, then you weren't really serious.
No, yeah. But I feel like nowadays, like everyone knows that law school, like any major can get you into law school now. So like it's very universal nowadays. Like even sometimes people who study political science or government or something that is very like law related can be like a little dull, or a lot of people go this route. And that's why like sometimes law schools want to find other people and other majors, because I feel like it gives a fresher. And it also, like my mom always says, like, why visual arts as your second one? Like, that's not really helping you with like law school. And I feel like I actually think it's the opposite. Yes, political science, it helps me understand the actual law part and policy side.
Right.
But I feel the art perspective, it gives a different perspective.
Sure.
And I feel like the combination of both is like an interesting combo, and I feel like it's kind of refreshing. And then,
You're almost setting up your niche, you know,
yeah,
on the other side, because there's so many niches in the law. You know, I mean, there's a lawyer for everything.
yeah. And like that's also another thing. I'm also really interested in entertainment law, and like that's in the entertainment.
Now, what does being Generation Z, and I believe your generation is also referred to as Zoomers. Yeah. Yes. That's, I guess, a catch-all phrase there, Zoomer, because I'm a part of the Boomers. And so with the Z there, the Zoomers. But what does being a Generation Z mean to you? And not just demographically, but culturally, politically, and even spiritually, if you're there.
I feel like, especially in this time, we're kind of all like, at first in the beginning, we were kind of all together. In this, I was like, we're like during COVID, we've gone through a lot. We've seen a lot of political changes, especially like the election and then now, and then obviously COVID. And I feel like since the beginning, a lot of at least like older generations were like, oh, Gen Z is very progressive and very like out there. And I genuinely do feel that way. However, actually, I think now with all the Joe Rogans and all the like Andrew Tate, I feel like there's starting to become a more like divide in between like the progressives. And then now there's going to more conservative demographic. So I feel like there's kind of been a little bit more of a rift, but I feel like our generation right now is able to learn from our experiences that we've gone through and genuinely make a change. I know right now it's very hard, but I feel like we're very underestimated, but I feel like we have the ability to make a change. I feel like we're very vocal. And if we like form communities, we're able to kind of like prevail and progress.
You know, in the words of a politician that you might be familiar with, there was a phrase that was used: hard work is good work.
Yes. I don't know who.
Well, let's just say she's not president right now.
Yes.
But that's the phrase she used to
We
always
failed
use.
her. I'm so sad. But we didn't fail her. We tried our best.
Yeah. Well, you know, and she would be the first to say, don't stop. Don't stop.
Yeah. I feel like her message, like when she lost, and she was like, don't stop and keep going, because I feel like better days are forward, and they are. It's just more hard work to get that done. But it will.
Yeah. I mean, that has happened in history. You know, some people knock on the door, some people get the door ajar, some people have kicked the door open there so that others coming behind them can get in and do their thing.
Exactly.
Whatever it is. Now, what do you think older generations, speaking of older generations, what do you think older generations get wrong or overlook about Gen Z?
I think that we're naive in thinking that, for example, like the environment, and they're like, oh, it's a hoax. Why even try? It's irreversible. But I feel like if you really look into it, Gen Z is more powerful than you think and more educated. I feel like they underestimate how educated we are and how we can understand that educating ourselves is very much a good step towards progression. Because once we educate ourselves on either policies or any other issue, I feel like people can band together and understand, okay, we need to do this and this to progress. And I feel like the older generation either don't listen to us because they already think, oh, they're naive, they don't know what they're talking about, or they just don't believe us and don't think that we have the capabilities to do so.
Well, point of information, I might be of the older generation, I guess, compared to, but I don't believe any of that, what they believe. If that's what they believe, I'm not a part of their camp. I'm progressive all the way. I say go.
And I feel like you also are also helping us, like our cause.
I'm all about that.
And giving, like, for example, right now, you're giving me a platform, or younger generations a platform to speak to other younger generations and older generations. Yeah.
It's important. And you're a part of a generation that grew up during climate change, school shootings, and the rise of social media.
Yeah.
How do you carry all of that?
Very, very hard. I feel like, honestly, Gen Z, especially, how we carry that is humor. I feel like that's a huge thing. Like, we cope with a lot of those things by just joking about it. But it is really hard for, like, when you said school shooting, there was like, I think at my school, like, a violence on campus because there was like a stabbing, like, outside of our school. And we protested during school time, and we protested for more school safety, but also meaning that there was less police presence on campuses. And what I found most special about my experience at that school was that one of our government teachers gave us a platform to talk about school safety. One of our requirements for graduation is to have this class project about an issue that you're very passionate about, and it was supposed to be individual, but she was like, do you guys want to do a whole class project on school safety? So then we interviewed a bunch of teachers and a bunch of students on safety on campus. And then at the end, we had a meeting with our principal and the superintendent to talk about school safety on campus. So I really appreciated her giving us an outlet, and especially her as a teacher being a person of authority to, back up our thoughts. And I feel like that was very impactful.
That's key. Because more than likely, well, I don't know, but there may have been a chance that particular teacher experienced similar things when they were coming up. Mm-hmm. And so it's all about giving back.
Yeah.
Giving back and paying forward.
Exactly.
Because if this is happening now, something else will be happening down the road. Something unforeseen, and I imagine we can all just scratch our head is all of this really real? Is this happening? My goodness. So what gives your generation hope right now? And if it is hope I'll just leave it there. What gives your generation hope?
I think the activism that I see from my friends, at least at Brown, I know a lot of people are involved in clubs, and there's a lot of protests at my school, for example, the Palestine protests, and then also the ICE raids. So it's really surprising and very nice to see that whenever I go outside, there's these huge rallies, and they're all young people, and they're out there, at least at Brown, on the news, the police came on campus, and then there were students who were getting arrested, and people putting their education on the line as well. And I find a lot of hope in that.
Okay.
Just my own community and how much we're willing to risk ourselves, and the people with privilege, especially. I see a lot of for the Palestine protests, a lot of white people with privilege. They're the ones that oh yes, we're the ones who need to be on the lines and help the people who can't necessarily do that. And I find that really encouraging and hopeful.
And you'll find that has been the case throughout history with all the civil rights movements and everything. It's always that element there. Now, you're involved with La Alianza. Did I pronounce that correct? What's the energy like that? What's the energy like in that space?
So at first I was very hesitant with joining any affinity clubs because I know that they can be a little cliquey sometimes. And I'm very scared of dipping my toes in that. But it was essentially a very small club in the beginning. And so I felt very comfortable joining that space because I knew one person on the club. So I was like, oh, okay, let me try it. And it's also pre-law, something that I am interested in. And it was just a small group of people. And we give resources to Latino students, specifically on campus, for pre-law or pre-policy, because there's not a lot of us on campus. There's not a lot. There's a lot of pre-med, STEM, but pre-law, we don't see that much. And so we just wanted to create a space that was for Latinos that are even thinking about pre-law or pre-policy.
Well, what's one conversation happening there that the wider public should really be listening to?
I'd say, because our club is mostly giving out, doing events. And so I feel like one conversation is that it's more attainable than you think. So, for example, a lot of people think, oh, the LSAT and all this prep and law school is very expensive. But there's actually a lot of resources out there to help people like us get to those places, whether that be money. There's a bunch of alumni networks or websites that help Latino students get the platform that they need to do that. One of our events last semester was we collaborated with Yale Latinas, and they're another affinity group at Yale Law School of women in their law school. And we actually got a tour from them. We went on a train to Yale. And so we got a tour from them. And then we were able to ask them questions. And the conversation was very honest. And that's what I really appreciated. Because in that space, we were able to ask, how did you afford to pay for this? We were able to ask hard questions. How were you able to navigate all this stuff with the Trump, budget cuts? And it was just a safe space for Latino students to kind of understand our own perspectives, because we come from a specific perspective, and bond over that and see how people like us from first-gen immigrant families can get to such huge accomplishments of going to law school. And it's possible.
Yes, that sounds like an excellent organization, and one I would definitely support, for sure. Definitely. Now, with everything going on in the world, the immigration, you mentioned Gaza, student debt, you mentioned that, race relations, what issue is personal to you right now?
Definitely immigration, especially now with the ICE raids that are happening as we speak right now, as we speak in downtown LA. And in the podcast episode that I did for Brown, where my segment was talking about immigration in Rhode Island, because there is a section in Rhode Island that is predominantly Latino. ICE is targeting those places and going to establishments and deporting individuals. And it hits so close to home because my parents are immigrants, and I saw them through the whole process. I know how it feels to every second of the day be scared that, oh, will my parents get deported? And even now in the circumstance that they're in, now that they're citizens, I'm still having that concern, and that's still very scary. So I think that ICE and immigration policy is definitely a huge thing. I think the biggest part of that to take away is to use your resources and pass them along to, for example, if an ICE agent comes to you, tell your parents who don't necessarily know English, because they usually fall victim to complying with the police and say, okay, these are the words that you need to say in order to push them away and not open the doors, because these are your rights and you must know your rights. So I think the most important thing is telling everyone you know, these are your rights, say this exact script, to not fall victim to that.
That's excellent. Being prepared, that's half the battle.
Yeah.
But as you alluded to, these are just some very interesting times there that, thank God we got Brother Garcia back. But things are just wild. I mean, even if you're prepared, there's very hairy situations that you're involved with, but at least you're prepared.
Exactly.
In fact, if not just in fact, but at least mentally ready, because it could go in a number of different directions there. Now, you mentioned your podcast, and I had the opportunity of listened to maybe a couple of them, and I enjoyed them. I definitely did. I just smiled. I was just cheesing all the way through, like, oh, this is great. This is great. You're a podcast host and editor over there at Brown. It's for the Brown Political Review. Is that what that is?
Yes.
Okay. How did you get into that space, and what do you love most about it?
It was a very random and moment for me, because I just saw that on their Instagram that they had their creative applications open, and it was the multimedia board, the business board, and then I'm part of the multimedia board. And so when I applied,
and I am subscribed to it, by the way, but go ahead.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. And when I applied, there was what are you interested in? Photography, podcasts, video. And of course I did all of them because I love trying new things. And I was put on the podcast team, and that was the one where I was the most unfamiliar. Out of photography and video, I knew kind of most of that, but podcast I was unfamiliar. But I also wanted to kind of dip my toe into podcasts because I feel like that'd be very fun. And it's also kind of a combination of reporting and also the creative side of sound, music, editing. So I was really excited. And it kind of works in that there's two co-hosts a week, and we decide what segments we want. We work with other people on the podcast team, and they pitch ideas, and they're okay, we would have segments, for example, a day in office, which one person would be assigned to what is Trump doing today in office. And then we would have Passport, which is news that would be happening in a different country. So we would have recurring segments, but also reporting on issues that are happening as we speak. So I think my favorite part of this is researching and then kind of doing a news article, but being able to say it out loud and give my own opinions on it. And that's been really fun. There was the LGBTQ rights episode, and I was talking about the executive order of Trump putting an X on transgender passports. And I actually read that helped me. I actually read the whole executive order, and it was really fun for me. I was nitpicking at stuff, and it coincided with my love for the Constitution, because I understood what constitutional rights technically were violated in this executive order. And it was really fun to think about and dissect. And yeah.
And it was fun for you, but it was very informative for everybody that's listening to that, and encouraging, and provided direction and everything that, hey, at least someone knows what's going on, or someone else gets it there. So along those lines there, what do you think makes a powerful episode?
I think not only reporting on it, but also getting anecdotes from real life. For example, with that passport thing, I feel it was more powerful that I showed an example that was happening in real life. For example, in that episode, I was talking about an actress that was talking about that executive order, Hunter Schafer. She felt it firsthand. And I feel especially for Gen Z, because I feel like it reaches a wider audience when you talk about someone so into pop culture and you're kind of relating to that and be like, oh, wow, even celebrities, people that we know are actually like being affected by politics. I feel like that is the biggest thing, and the biggest thing that I feel like young people need to understand is that to get involved in politics, because I feel like that's everyone's, like, you're living in a very political world. Like you must be political in a way to feel empathy, sympathy for other people. And I feel like an anecdote is very powerful when reporting news, because you can put a story or a picture or a person to a specific issue.
Right. That's also known in biblical terms as a parable.
Yes.
That was used to teach a whole lot. You're at Brown, Rhode Island, moved there from the LA area.
Yeah.
What's it like navigating both of those worlds? Or maybe it's best put, what do you miss most about home, and what have you gained from being away from home?
Yeah, I think a big part of, because prior to going to college, I actually never really went to another state. I was always in California. And either way, when I was in my college search process, I was always determined. I was like, I wanted to go to a good school. And I never really thought about the actual leaving my state. I was just like, oh yeah, I need to go to good school. I didn't actually think about like, wait, I need to be thousands of miles away from my family.
Right.
I thought it was going to be like, once I actually got closer to move-in day, I was like, wow, I didn't actually think about this. And I was very scared. But I also have to understand that it's necessary for you to grow as a person. And the change was definitely easier than I thought, actually. Because also I feel like now we can FaceTime my family and there's more contact and connect between that. So I feel like that was pretty easy. But I guess the hardest part is obviously not seeing or hugging your family members in person. Like once you are having a tough time, but also I feel like I was able to learn with that experience by making friends at college who really, I guess, are in place of your family and who really support you and, are there for you. So I think dealing with the family, being away, you just kind of have to make up for it by forming your own community at college. Yeah, and I feel like also a lot of times the hardest part is also imposter syndrome, which is being away from a tiny high school to now this plethora of great students you feel inferior and you're like, wow. But then you also have to think in retrospection that you're like, oh, you're here for a reason. You are picked because you have a different perspective than other people here.
Hey, you belong.
Yeah.
You belong just like them,
Exactly.
They came from somewhere too. And you know what? What I've ascertained just from this conversation and from your father, you have a very powerful voice and you clearly have a lot to say.
Yeah.
Where did that confidence come from?
That's a great question. I feel like I don't.
Or are you still building it?
Oh, yes. I feel like that's a thing that's a lifelong thing. You can't really attain full confidence ever. But I feel like definitely it's like you work your way through that. And I feel like a reason for that is partly my parents. They allow me to speak. They allow me to speak my mind. And that's also one of the reasons why I was like, oh, maybe I should be a lawyer, because I'm really good at arguing. And I'm really good at my parents allow me to do a little repartee with them, even if it's a little mean. But I feel like, yeah, my parents allow me to speak my mind and say what I want to say. So I feel like confidence is also just helped me with what I want to say. And also being a politician, you have to say everything. But I don't really want to be a politician. I want to be a lawyer, but you still have to have a strong voice in the courtroom for that.
Yes, you do. Now, as far as that goes, prosecutor or defense?
I think defense.
Okay.
Yeah. I definitely wanted to defend the little guy. Or at least, you have to defend. Yeah, I guess like later in my career, I do want to defend the little guy, but I also need to build up a little bit of money first in my career, and then I can defend the little guy.
Actually, now looking forward, do you see yourself heading definitely towards law and law school or the media or public policy, or are you still exploring?
Exploring. I think more and more in college, I decide that I don't want to be a politician, and I want to do more so like actual what lawyers do, because what I found nitpicking and like looking at laws and finding loopholes, and I just really like presenting a case, making like all these connections and like defending a side. I feel like I'm guided more towards lawyer, but then also at the same time I'm also very open for that, like anything that presents in that route. I'm just very open to whatever opportunity that comes to me, and whatever I think I will learn from the most, I'll take it. Especially being like pretty young, I have time to decide what I want to do. And also there's hobbies, and sometimes hobbies can turn into a job, a career. So I think just like, funny enough, lawyer is the plan right now. And if my creative career takes off, then I can go that way, or I could find a way that it intersects.
Well, speaking of time, and this might be a tough question here, if you can, look ahead 10 years. What kind of world would you like to be helping build? And what role would you like to be playing in it, the building? You've already touched on a few things there. I mean, you're part of an organization as well. But what do you think?
I think community, definitely. A more collaborative world. Also a more creative world. I really am for people being more creative in their lives, because I feel like it would be beneficial to them. Yeah, and then what I see myself playing that role, I don't know, kind of being a speaker guide for that. I don't know what role that will take, either being advocates, activists, and sharing my knowledge, or I don't know.
That's a start right there. That's a start. Many started right there.
Yeah.
And it just evolves into something beautiful. And I have no doubt that it will. Final question. If the entire country's youth, and by the way, this podcast, as you know, most podcasts are widely distributed. So it's going to be, all over the world. But if the entire country's youth, we'll focus on this country for the sake of the conversation, youth were tuned in right now, listening on the rebroadcast, on the replay, and you had 60 seconds to speak to them, what would you say?
Wow.
60 seconds or less.
I would say embrace change and be rid of missed opportunity. Because I feel like a lot, like the saying goes, you miss 100% of the opportunities that you don't take. And I genuinely think that's how the saying goes. I genuinely think that's a good way to look at things. If you're like hesitant about something, but you know that in the long run, it will benefit you in some way, you will learn at least one thing, I think go for it, because the worst thing that can happen is that you don't like it. Okay, let's go back. But the best thing that can happen is something unimaginable that you can't imagine. So I feel like take comfort in being uncomfortable a little bit, because you never know what will happen. And I think just taking risks and being creative.
Yes. Now, that's speaking directly to the youth. Now, if the elders were like over the shoulder, they were like listening, like, what is she listening to? What is he listening to? What would you like them to overhear in the message there?
I say be active listeners and be enablers. Be enablers to, yes, be enablers to your sons, daughters, family members, young people, and yeah, be enablers.
I think that's excellent and great punctuation there. Becky, thank you so very much for taking the time out to have this conversation with me. And it's that part. See, that's where the phrase comes from. It's that part right there that matters. And to you and everyone at Brown putting in the work right now, keep going, keep doing, and keep being.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome there. God bless you.
That's it. If this episode gave you something to think about, share it. Talk about it. And if you've got further questions, get in touch at contact us at itsthatpart.com. That's contact us at itsthatpart.com. And you've got it. So until the next episode, be aware and stay awake. It's That Part.
What's the truth? Total truth in every fact. What's that spark? Oh, that part that brings you back. What's that light? Oh, that part that makes it clear. It's that part. Oh, the truth you need to hear. Truth in every fact. Oh, that part, that spark. Truth in every